So what I'm going to concentrate on today is structure, how to set up the structure in an efficient way. And this is as far as we got yesterday, where we had the overall guide file here, and then we started making a structure file inside. Okay, so this is fairly ugly with these tiny little columns and so on. So we need to work on that a little bit. The first thing I'm going to do is change the graphics a little bit so that we can see the structure a little bit more clearly. So we can change, as long as you don't select anything, you can always change the view controls of the image you're in. So I'm going to come over here to Visibility and Graphics, and go to Revit Links, and we can do a couple of things here. We can change it to halftone. So this will turn all the linked files in the project to halftone, as in it'll kind of grey it out. If I apply that, press OK, it kind of looks like that. Let's change it to hidden lines so we can see that better. So you can see that now the structure is much more visible related to the linked file, so we can see what we're working on. The other thing we can do over here in Visibility and Graphics and go to Revit Links is we can change it to an underlay and apply that. So now it seems like the linked model is just like a piece of tracing paper in 3D behind. If you can just about see that on the screen here, but it's clearer in front of me here. Let's see if I can get it a bit clearer on the screen there. No, it doesn't really make any difference. But so that means it's a good way of actually displaying a structural drawing, because it locates it within the building, within the all the other coordinates that exist within the building. So, and it also gives you a clear idea as to what you're doing. So that's just one thing. That's just something to do with the visibility elements. But what we want to do is actually create two types of column in here, because there's two types of column. I haven't measured them or anything, but I'll just show you how to do it rather than giving you the exact measurements, because I haven't measured them. But you can start, once you've inserted a column into the right position, you can always use that position and change the column later, like everything in Revit: windows, doors, walls. So we can actually go in and we can select this column here and edit the family. And this is where we're starting to get into family editing. So basically, anytime you want to make a new component in Revit, it's probably a good idea to do it in the family browser rather than in the component command, which is inside Revit. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if you want to do something that has parametrics to it, as in it'll stretch based on the figures you type in, you have to do it in the family editor. So let's go into this one. This family editor here is slightly different to the overall project editor. So it has fewer options along the top here, but it also has these pure 3D modeling commands like extrude, blend, which puts two shapes together into one. It's got revolve, which is very good for making circular symmetrical objects like handrails, for example. Sweeps for long elements with a profile. And also we can also do swept blends, which blends two types of shapes together to create So you have a lot of creative options in here. So the first thing we can do is change this column. I'm going to save it as a new column anyway. So let's say save as family. Put it on the desktop as usual, and I'm going to call it assembly hall column. Save. And because we're using an existing column, there are properties already set up for it up here. So if I open this button here, the family types button, in here, this is where you kind of set up the different measurement types for your column. So you can see it's got three types set up in here. If I select from the one it is, which is 45 by 195, I change it to 45 by 120 and apply that. You can actually control all the parameters within the column by modifying all this stuff. So I'm going to make a new type. I'm going to make a new type of this column. I'm going to call this one, just call it assembly hall. And let's assume, what is the column? It's around about 180 square, is it? How much?
One small one, you know there are two one next to each other.
Yeah.
One of them is 20 20.
Okay, so it's,
195.
okay, so let's say 200 by 200, just for the sake of doing something. And if I apply that, whoops, that was 2,000. That's not supposed to happen. It's 200. Apply. So then we've got a column that's 200 by 200. We can go in then and we can delete all the family types we don't need. And there's one left, this one here. Delete, just to keep the project clean, so there isn't more information in there that we don't need. All the structural analysis stuff we don't need to worry about, that's for an engineer. But we can change the structural material in here if we wanted to whatever we want. We can change the appearance and so on. And apply. So now we've made the basis of the column. But the first column in there, I think the column that's supporting the steelwork, it has kind of a little molding around the top, doesn't it? Yeah. So let's just put that in while we're here, okay? So the way we do that is to use the sweep command. So I'm going to make a solid sweep. And I can actually just pick the path, which runs along the top here. I'm going to say it's going to go there, there, and there. So we know it's going to run around the top of the column. Accept that. And now we can edit the sketch. So go edit profile and come into it here. Let me just do that again. Select profile, by sketch, edit profile. Well, it doesn't need to do it in here. Okay. Select profile. Okay. So then we can just go down here and start making model lines. Am I in the wrong plane? By sketch, edit profile. Why isn't this working? There's something weird about my my card or something, but it's supposed to show some crosshairs as to where I'm editing the sketch. But anyway, let's see if it works if I do it along here. So let's just make something. And hopefully this will be working. Yeah, it did work. I don't know, there's something weird about the video. So you can make a molding along the top quite easily. And we can also select the molding, and where it says material over here, we want to get it the same material as the column. So instead of choosing the material, we can actually choose this little button over here on the right. And we can just say, well, we want it to be the same as the structural material of the existing column. It automatically does it. And the last thing we need to do is just press join, and then we can join the two elements together, so it just ends up being, you know, a column like that. Okay. So we have this assembly hall column. We can load it into the project, and now that it's in the project, we can select all these elements. The project, and we should be able to change it to the assembly hall column here, and there they are. So then you can very quickly set up the columns. Some of them need to be spun around or, you know, modified so that they're oriented in the right direction, but these ones are in the right way. Probably should change the levels that these guys go to we'll go to top of beam, just so that they're slightly lower. That doesn't make any difference. So that's a way of making a simple molding on the column, which is kind of related to the first column we have. Once we have it in there, we can apply it to a level directly, but we can also give it an offset. So we can give the top offset. Let's say we want to go down by 600 millimeters. We can always take it down from whatever level we're working from. So it's a good idea to have at least a level for the top of your primary structure, as in the top of the steel beam, the top of the main timber beam that these small beams connect into or so forth. So then at least you have something to work from. Okay? Any questions about that so far? Yeah?
What about making the columns like this?
That's what I'm going to do now. Any other questions? Okay, I'll just go on with the other columns then. So we've already set up these columns, so we don't want to do the same work again. So I'm going to go back into the assembly hall column. I'm going to save it as something else. So save as family, put it on the desktop, and let's just call this assembly hall column with struts. Save. And we can delete the molding because we don't need that anymore. So now we need to make some struts, and it's usually a good idea to make them outside in another family, because, and also it's a good idea to show you how to use other families, because there's something that we can use, is something called face-based families. So there's families we can make that we can get them to just stick directly to a flat surface, and it's really useful for lots of things like that you can add to families, but also add to projects, light fittings, for example, or anything that you want to adhere to a surface very quickly. So I'm going to make, for the struts, I'm going to make a face-based family. So I'm going to go New Family, and I'm going to go down until I find something called Metric Generic Model Face-Based. And if I show you what this is, it's giving us a kind of a wall as just an idea as to where we're going to put our element. So to make the shape we want, which is kind of a right angle triangle, isn't it? It's like that, yeah. And we want to stick it on the side of the column. So I got to use this swept blend option here, solid swept blend, which allows us to take two shapes and then make a 3D model between them. And again, at this time I'm going to sketch the path, and I'm just going to sketch a path up here, and let's say, how big is it around about? It's about 600 mils or something. Anybody know? Let's say it's 600 mils. So 600 mils long, and you can see we've got two areas here where we can draw the individual shapes. So I'm going to start off by accepting the path. I'm going to select profile 1, edit profile. This time the crosshairs are not disappearing, so that's good. So I'm going to just make a line in the middle, and then I'm going to use the offset command, which is this command here, to offset by 70 mils, let's say. So offset that way, and I'm going to offset one that way. So we've got one here and one here. And I'm going to delete the one in the middle again. So now I'm just going to draw a line between the two bottoms of those two lines. And we'll assume that it's not completely perfect. It doesn't come to a completely perfect point. So we can always say that it's, I don't know, 5 or 10 millimeters away from the face of the column. And once we've done that, we can trim these ends together, and we've got the bottom shape of the triangle. Accept that, and go over and do profile 2. Create model line, do the same thing again. Profile 2, edit profile. Here we go. Use the offset tool. Going to offset it by 70 mils. That direction, that direction. Delete the guideline. And how wide do you think? How far does it go out? Do you think 200 mils? Probably. Let's say 200 mils. Did I make that 2,000? No, it's 200. Okay. All right. So then we can trim it together again. Trim, trim, and accept it. So now we've got both shapes at the end, and if I just accept that, it finishes off the shape for us. So that's kind of the shape of the strut that we want, and it's sitting on this face here, so I know we can put it onto whatever we want when we get in there. What we should really do, well, let's leave that for the moment. Okay, so let's just give that a name. So save as family, desktop. I'm going to call this strut, and load it into the assembly hall column. So it comes in here like this, and you can use the space bar to orientate it correctly. Okay, so I'm going to just place it so it's in the right position first of all, like that. And once we have it in there, we can select it and use this align command and say, well, we want to align it from here to here. Oh, that was the wrong way around. I always do that backwards. Cancel. Align command. Select line of point reference for alignment. This one to this one. Ah, did it backwards again. There we go. And we can lock it to the top of the element. And we should be able to also move it, at least align it to the face here. And what did we say? This was 200 and this was 140, was it? Yeah, 140. So so we need to move it in by 30 mils. So I'm going to say move. And just type in 30. So we've got it centered there. And let's put another one on the other side. Generic models, strut. So once we insert it into the other family, it will turn up in the project browser here, and we can just then drag it in, drag it across, and use the spacebar again to place it. So do it again. Align. Ah, I always do that backwards. God damn it.
Not again.
It's like a mental block. What did I do the last time?
Column.
Column first. Thank you. Column first. Okay. And then we just move this one. Okay. Now, if we select it, we don't have an option to change the material of it. So let me just check if we have the extra option in here. Edit type, material. No. So we want the material to be the same as whatever column it is. So let's just go back into the strut model and select it. And we need at least to add a parameter. Now this is the beginnings of family editing with parameters, and this gets really complex if you really get into it, but it doesn't have to be that complicated. Effectively, if you want to be able to control the materials of a specific object you're making within the next project you're in, you need to add a parameter to it. So I'm going to add a parameter. I'm just going to call it material. And it's a type parameter, which means it's going to apply to every version of this we have, and it's grouped under materials and finishes. And that's all you need to do. It just exists in the background. So if I load that back into the column view, overwrite, we should have the option over here if we get into edit type. So now you can see that we have a material option within this element. I can either type in the material here, or if I use this button here, I can align the material of the strut to the material of the column. So that means that when we get into the overall project, we only ever need to change it once. Okay, that's a little bit complicated, but it'll make sense after a while. So once we're finished with that, we can load it into the project. This one. and it turns up over here, and we can use the structure tool to add a column, and we want to make sure it's not a, let's just go into the ground floor to do it correctly. So column, make sure it's a vertical column, and we can put it in somewhere like that, isn't it? Just slightly behind the other one. As usual, when you put a column into into Revit, it appears slightly below ground level, so we need to go and modify it once we get in there. So it goes ground floor to, let's say, walkway level, and we take off the offset. Apply. So then you got 2 columns in there. And then, of course, you can play with the offset from the top back to whatever you want it to be, so that it works with however you've got it set up. Okay? Will I pause that? Okay, I'm just going to do this, not really related to the project, but just off in the corner. So we have this roof truss over there, which we need to have a way of setting up quickly. So in the structure tab, we have a button called structural trusses, and this allows us to draw certain trusses. It's got certain ones set up already. It's got attic truss, which if I just select that now and just start drawing it, it actually just sets up a truss for us. And the truss is modifiable and stretchable and so forth. You can see in here, if I roll the cursor over it, you can see the force lines, which are these blue lines behind it, which are kind of the statics of the truss, and then these elements outside are what we've chosen for the individual elements. For some reason this has got a massive piece in here, but you can change all that stuff afterwards. So that's what it's got, some stuff set up in there, but we need to make our own truss, and again the easy way to do it is to go into family. So I'm going to make a new family, and I'm going to come down to metric. Where is it? It's over here somewhere. Can anybody see metric truss? This one, yeah. Metric truss.
There is one at the top, the right.
No, I got this one here.
Okay.
Isn't it? Which one?
Metric structural trusses. Up.
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's just. Thank you. So this is kind of giving us a diagram as to the height of the truss and the length of the truss and so on. But we have 3 new buttons up here, and this relates to statics, which Claudio is going to come in and give you a lecture on tomorrow, by the way, at 8:30 in the morning. Introduction to statics. So we have a top chord, a bottom chord, and a web. So the top chord we can very quickly just draw in like this. So it's the top triangular element of the truss we want to make. We can put a bottom chord in, which is like that, and we can put in parts of the web, and the web is just what fills it up. So let's just quickly draw a diagram of what that looks like. We can do another one. Thank you. And let's just draw this, and we can make it so that it's perpendicular to that. And this one is, because I think it's perpendicular, isn't it? Perpendicular to that. Whoops. Do that again. So that's kind of the shape of the, or at least the diagram of the truss that we want. So let's just save it, give it a name as always. Save it as a family. Call it truss test. Save. Load it into the project. And you can see it turns up over here. So then if I go into structure and draw a truss, we've got the beginnings of it there. So we have the shape of it, and we should be able to modify the height of it to whatever we want it to be. And we've got these elements here that are coming in at perpendicular. So we probably need to work out exactly what those things are to get it correct. But let's have a look at it. If we change it to 6,000, for example, it doesn't make it any better. But once we do that, we can select the truss, and we can come in and edit the type, and we can modify the structural members of all the individual elements in there. So I can change the framing type in here to steel if I wanted to, if I apply that. We've got steel beams along the top there. What is this one? The vertical one. Let's make that one, I don't know, you wouldn't make it timber, but let's make that that as well. Let's just turn everything to steel for the moment. So you can set up the truss in here. Now you notice that this isn't working correctly, and the reason for that is that when I set up the diagram, I didn't lock the dimensions between the bottom of these beams and the bottom of the truss here. So we probably need to do that, but that's getting into a little bit more complexity than I was expecting to do. But anyway, let's have a look at it. So let's edit the family again. What I'm going to do here is see if I can get this to work, but it might actually make more sense for this truss that if we don't draw it perpendicularly, and you kind of have to play with this, we can draw it so that it links to the midpoint here and links to the midpoint here. Let's load that into the project. And you can see that's getting closer to it. So you can kind of start to play with the diagram in there. You can also play with the joints. So for example, down here, you can see that these are steel joints, and usually what happens is that the steel will stop here, and then you would have a gusset plate, and the whole thing would be, well, that's one way of doing it anyway. But you can also do it in such a way that that you can modify the joints. And there's a tiny little button up here called Beam Column Joints, and it's under the Modify panel. And that allows you to control the joints of the beams together. So I'm going to select that. And it's as simple as this. You just get these little arrows. So it's actually asking you what wants to have the primacy here. So I can select that and say, well, it's going to go like that. Or I can break it apart at the top and say, this one has primary like that. And play with it that way until you get the joints more or less the way you want. And the last thing you can do is you can take the individual elements. If I tab this, I'm doing this quickly because I need to get it done, unpin it, you can actually change the lengths to which the individual elements go through and so forth. So you can start to play with the edges of the truss and how it works. Again, it's kind of a simple setup for a truss, but it's enough to get started with it.
Those force lines, are they the middle of the in the column?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and the force lines are also, you can, if you build up the structure in Revit very exactly, you can export the diagram of the force lines to structural analysis software, and it will actually analyze it correctly according to gravity and so on. But we won't do that. Any questions about that? Let's just resume here. I haven't done this to any particular level, but you have set up your levels within your cross section here. So when you're drawing your truss in place, you'll have a level for what the ridge is at. So all you need to do is go to that level in plan and draw a beam on that level. And that's it. Okay. The other thing
this beam here is actually a part of the truss.
Yeah.
So.
But it's not. I mean, it's still a separate piece of wood.
Yeah, of course, but.
Yeah.
The rafters, they go over the.
Okay. There's a couple of different ways of doing rafters. The easiest way is to use a beam system and to use the my mouse has died, and to use the individual beams as supports rather than drawing the beam system. So let me just fix this. Okay, so let's have a look at the elevations we have in here. let's say I'm going to make a new level. So I'm going to copy this level up, and I'm going to put it at the level of the ridge, more or less. I'm not worrying about it too much because I'm just going to use it to demonstrate stuff. But basically, now we have a position for a ridge beam. Let's just change that to ridge beam. And I'll use this eaves internal as the position for the eaves beam. Okay? So let's just go into plan view. Let's just go into eaves internal. Now, what the hell is that? Well, that's the roof. Let's just hide that. So just to give you an idea, so I'm going to make a beam. I'm going to make the reference level eaves internal, and I'm going to draw it from, let's just draw it from here to here. We don't want it to be concrete, so let's change it to something like that. Just timber beam. Let's just double check that's drawing in the right position. Okay. So let's go back in here and let's draw a beam. I'm not going to be too careful about where I put it, but let's put it at the ridge beam over here, like that. And let's just double check we have it at the right level, which we don't. I'm going to copy it up. So we've got two beams. One is more or less a wall plate, as in it's what the rafters sit upon, and the other is the ridge beam, okay? So we can actually make a beam system between them, a structural beam system. And because we've put in two beams as supports, we can pick those supports. So pick supports. I'm going to pick this one and this one. And you can see it starts to draw on the floor the position of the edges of the beam. Then we just need to close the loop. So I'm just going to use the line tool to close the loop. And I'm going to select 3D here because I wanted to draw in 3 dimensions. People always forget that, including me. And if I accept that, you can see it follows the line of what we drew. The only problem we have is it's going the wrong direction. So we go back in, edit the boundary, and select beam direction. And because I've drawn this at a weird angle, the beams are going to come in at a weird angle, but you'll be drawing it straight, so that's all right. Accept it again, and so the beams are in at that angle. And so we can continue to play with this until we get the right spacing, or we can change the shape of it. Let's try and make it straight. So you have quite a bit of freedom to play with these afterwards, and it starts to look like a rafter system, if you know what I mean. Edit boundary, beam direction. Let's change it to this one, and so on, and so on. Is that okay? Yeah. The individual purlins that you have in there, as in the beams that run along kind of halfway up the truss, you need to place them according to a level. That would be the best way to do that. So you set up a level for those purlins.
Over this rafter, as you said, there is another beam like in between.
Yeah.